Good morning. Welcome to our Bible study this morning. This morning, in honor of Mother's Day, I thought we would turn to Proverbs chapter 31, verses 10 through 31, and study the Bible characteristics for a virtuous woman. So we'll be looking this morning at Proverbs 31, verses 10 through 31. We're going to be looking at what the Bible says the characteristics are of a virtuous woman. While you're turning to Proverbs 31, let me just say, Proverbs 31 was written by a king named Lemuel. He's writing under the inspiration of God, and as he pens the words of Proverbs 31, he begins to describe a virtuous woman, her attributes, her characteristics, and also the value of a virtuous woman. So that's where we're going to start this morning. We're looking at Proverbs 31 and verse number 10. Proverbs 31 and verse number 10. Who can find a virtuous woman? For her price is far above rubies. Before we go any further in our study, what I would like to do is define what we mean by a virtuous woman. What does that word virtuous mean? I think we all have a pretty good idea of what virtuous means, but let me just real quickly explain from a Bible aspect what the word virtuous means. The word virtuous here comes from a Hebrew word. It's a word that carries with it four basic principles. When we talk about somebody being virtuous in this context, here's what we're talking about. We're talking about somebody who is influential, somebody who is highly valued, somebody who is resourceful, and finally somebody who is morally pleasing to God. Okay, so if we put those four together, basically what we have is this. A virtuous woman is a woman who's resourceful. She's morally pleasing to God. Because she's resourceful and morally pleasing to God, she then becomes influential in the eyes of others. Other people are willing to take her advice and follow her advice. They're willing to follow the example of her life because she's proven that she's both resourceful and she's also proven that she's morally pleasing to God. That's what makes her influential. Okay. Because she's influential, because she affects many people around her by setting a good example and then people follow that example, by teaching others and then following her advice, because she's so influential in helping others around her, she has great value. So that's really what we mean by a virtuous woman. Because she's resourceful, because she's pleasing to God, that makes her influential. And then because of her influence on others, she becomes very valuable. Not only from a world standpoint, but also she becomes very valuable in the eyes of the Lord. For the cause of Christ, she becomes a very valuable servant of the Lord. That's what we mean by a virtuous woman. So as we study these different characteristics we find in Proverbs 31, let's keep in the back of our minds, that's what we mean. Let me just say that I believe the world needs virtuous women. I have two examples in my life. My mother was what I believe was a virtuous woman. You know, my mother had some different health problems. She struggled at times. But one thing I know is this. Her influence in my life has helped to make me who I am today, and I mean that in a good way. I'm not talking about the faults I have in my life and the times I fail the Lord, but many times when I please the Lord and when I do what's right in His sight, my mother has to take at least part of the credit for that because of her influence in my life. You know, there were times when physically she would really suffer, and yet I remember very few times she would miss going to church on Sunday mornings, for example. You know, she just set the example. Even at times when it was very difficult for her to do what the Lord wanted, I would see her at times take a stand and do what the Lord wanted. So it's a blessing to be able to look back at a mother like that and to recognize what she's done for me over the years and how it's influenced my life over the years. Not only that, but my godly wife, Eva. I thank the Lord for her every day. She is such a blessing to me. If it wouldn't be for her, I would not be the servant of the Lord that I am today. I truly believe that. Different things have taken place in my life when at times I've become very discouraged and, felt like throwing your hands up. Well, it's because of her that I've been able to keep going, and it's because of her that I've been able to continue to serve the Lord. So, those are two examples of my life, and I'm sure there's others as well that have touched my life, but especially my mother and my wife. It's such a blessing to know that virtuous women exist on the earth and that they continue to influence people even to this day. I'm sure many of you have similar stories of women in your life that you recognize are virtuous women who have really helped you along the way. Okay, as we turn to Proverbs 31, verse number 10, let's once again now answer the question, what is the value of a virtuous woman? Lemuel says, who can find a virtuous woman? For her price is far above rubies. Folks, King Lemuel had it right. You find a virtuous woman and you have found something or someone that is very, very precious. They're very valuable. Think about the number of lives a virtuous woman can touch. Think of the number of lives that a virtuous woman can affect. By setting the proper example and by teaching the truth that she understands, a virtuous woman can become very influential. She can help many, many people. And when you see her effect in the lives of others, it makes her a very valuable person for the cause of Christ. To the ladies out there, let me just say, there is no greater goal for your life than to strive to be a virtuous woman based on the Bible characteristics for a virtuous woman. If you live your life in such a way, and if you set the goals in your life in such a way that you desire to be a virtuous woman and you strive for that, the Lord will honor you for that. Here are some of the characteristics of a virtuous woman that the Lord showed to King Lemuel. Number 1, she is trustworthy. Look at verses 11 and 12. The heart of her husband doth safely trust in her, so that he shall have no need of spoil. She will do him good and not evil all the days of her life. What a blessing it is for a husband to have a wife that he knows is only working for his good. He knows she can be counted on to give him support. She can be counted on to help him along the way. She can be counted on to support him and to be there when he needs her. That is such a blessing. And folks, I'll tell you, I know people who do not have a wife like that. In my past experiences in life, there have been times I've come to an understanding of what it's like to have a wife that isn't supportive and who opposes what you're trying to do. Let me tell you something, folks. For those of us who have godly wives, we need to thank our wives, and we need to appreciate our wives for being there to support us and for being there to trust in us and to help us along life's way. Like I said, without my godly wife Eve, I don't know what I'd do. I would definitely not be the servant of the Lord that I am if it wasn't for her. So we all need to take our time, husbands, to think about all that our wives do for us. And if they're supportive of us, if they're trying to help us along life's way, we need to really appreciate them for that and love them for that and care for them because of that. Number 2, the second characteristic of a virtuous woman. She recognizes the physical and spiritual needs of her family. She works tirelessly to supply those needs. Look at verse number 13. She seeketh wool and flax, and worketh willingly with her hands. She is like the merchant ships. She bringeth her food from afar. She riseth also while it is yet night, and giveth meat to her household, and a portion to her maidens. She considereth a field, and buyeth it. With the fruit of her hand she planteth a vineyard. She girdeth her loins with strength, and strengtheneth her arms. She perceiveth that her merchandise is good. Her candle goeth not out by night. She layeth her hands to the spindle, and her hands hold the distaff. There you can see how a virtuous woman sees the needs in her family. and the needs of others around her, and then she works tirelessly to supply those needs. Folks, a part of being a virtuous woman is being willing to sacrifice yourself for others. To be willing to say, I'm willing to do without, I'm willing to put forth the effort so someone else doesn't have to do without. I'm willing to do what someone else can't do or chooses not to do. You know, that's a part of being a virtuous woman. It's living a life of self-sacrifice for the sake of others. I know some people may say, well, you know, that sounds like a horrible way to live your life, to be constantly giving for others. Let me tell you something. The times in my life when I've given for others and I've sacrificed for others have been some of the most blessed times of my life. By the time it's all said and done, and I look back at how the Lord has used me in that person's life, it is such a blessing and it's such an encouragement to me to know I was able to help somebody along life's way. Well, boy, let me tell you something. Compared to what a virtuous woman can do for others, my service pales in comparison. I'm telling you, a woman, a talented woman, who is watching out for the needs of others and striving to meet those needs, she is a great blessing indeed. It goes on. Verse number 3, she is compassionate to others in need. She stretched out her hand to the poor, yea, she reacheth forth her hands to the needy. Okay, here we find what? A virtuous woman is compassionate or shows compassion to people in need. She recognizes what they're lacking in life, and then out of love she acts to try to meet those needs. You know, it's one thing to do something for others because you want a pat on the back, or it's one thing to try and help other people because you want the praise of men. You want other people to see and say how great you are. Well, here we're told that's not why a virtuous woman helps others. A virtuous woman helps others because she's compassionate toward them. It's because she loves them. And she simply wants to meet their needs. Whether or not she gets a pat on the back is immaterial to a virtuous woman. Whether other people notice what she's doing for others is of no consideration for a virtuous woman. She helps other people because she simply loves them. You know, I've seen that in the life of my mother-in-law. There's times that she helps people without any regard whatsoever whether she's going to receive praise for it or not. A lot of times I've seen her do things for, well, even for us. For example, we've gone through a period of unemployment where I was unemployed for a while. Boy, she just graciously helped us any way she could to help meet our needs financially or in what other way she could help without ever making it a big deal to anybody else. So, you know, there's an example where just simply because she loved us, she wanted to help us. She wasn't doing it because she wanted our praise or anybody else's praise. So you can see where being a virtuous woman is not simply an outward action. Being a virtuous woman is also living a life that's pleasing to the Lord inwardly. Doing things for the right motive, not simply to do things, but to do them for the right motive. Another aspect of being a virtuous woman, she is productive. Look at verses 21 through 25. She is not afraid of the snow for her household, for all her household are clothed with scarlet. She maketh herself coverings of tapestry. Her clothing is silk and purple. Her husband is known in the gates, when he sitteth among the elders of the land. She maketh fine linen and selleth it, and delivereth girdles unto the merchant. Strength and honor her clothing, and she shall rejoice in time to come. What is a virtuous woman? She is a productive woman. She's not a woman that just wastes her time, but she's a woman that's productive. Once again, producing in many cases goods that will help others. So a virtuous woman is one that's productive. And then out of love, she takes what she produces and helps others. Look at another principle concerning a virtuous woman. She possesses the truth, and she shares it with others. She openeth her mouth with wisdom, and her tongue is the law of kindness. This is verse 27. She looketh well to the ways of her household, and eateth not the bread of idleness. The virtuous woman not only meets the physical needs of her family, but she also works to meet the spiritual needs of others. My one sister is a missionary in Brazil, and I see this in her life all the time. Peggy, my sister, she's a missionary. She has sacrificed a lot over the years to be supportive of her husband, to be supportive of her family as they've lived down in Brazil for many years. Not only does she take care of their physical needs, but then, man, she also takes care of their spiritual needs as well. I know she helps, in the different churches they're ministering to. She not only works to meet people's physical needs, but she works to meet people's spiritual needs as well. If there was ever an example of self-sacrifice that I've seen, it's in the life of Peggy, the way she was willing to do all of these things, to go to a far country, to live her life the way that she has, all for the sake of taking the gospel to the lost. To meet the spiritual needs of people is the highest possible ministry any one of us can have. And don't ever let anybody kid you. If you ever think, well, to meet somebody's spiritual needs, I need to be either a pastor or a missionary, don't kid yourself. You can help to meet people's spiritual needs with people you work with your neighbors, with the members in your family. I say, well, how do I meet the spiritual needs of people? For those who are relatively familiar with the Bible and you feel comfortable talking about the scriptures to people, you can verbally share verses with people. Share them the teachings of God's Word. But there's even another way to help people spiritually. Simply by living your life in a way that's pleasing to the Lord. Setting the example for other people to follow. That helps them spiritually as well. And you know what? Over the years, one of the things I've noticed is this. Listen, the most effective witness normally is not people who simply speak the truth to other people. Normally, the most effective witness is people who live their life in front of other people. They set the example in front of other people, and gradually over time, those people that are watching the Christian then begin to recognize, there's something really different about them in a good way. There's something that makes them stand out. There's something they have that I want. And more often than not, that's how many people are led to Christ. It's through another person's example as they watch our lives of service to the Lord. So folks, don't ever feel like you have to be a preacher to share with other people, the Lord and His truth. Simply by living your life in a way that's pleasing to Him helps in so many ways. By setting that example, people see that. They see you've got something they want, and then they may come up and ask you about it. Well, boy, what makes you different? Why aren't you worried in this situation? How can you just get through the problems in life and it seems like they don't bother you like they do some people? And then right there's your opportunity to share with them Christ. For a virtuous woman, she does that. She's concerned about the spiritual needs of others, and she lives her life in such a way that she helps to meet the spiritual needs of others. Finally, number 6, the characteristics of a virtuous woman. Her actions demand praise, honor, and respect from all that crosses her path. I have another sister, Jackie. She works at a homeless shelter in Akron, Ohio. Let me tell you something, folks. In my mind, what Jackie does with those homeless people, when she stands before the Lord, she's going to gain more rewards than many of us who have not dedicated our lives to help people who are poor and needy and just about at the bottom of everything. It amazes me how Jackie has consistently, she's done this now for many years. I'm not sure exactly how long, but I would guess probably close to 20 years. Between 10 and 20 years she's been working there. It's amazing to me how she can continually, day in and day out, simply give her life for helping people that are homeless, people that are in need. Her actions demand us to give honor and glory to the Lord for working in her life in that way. You know, she had a difficult past, and yet the Lord enabled her to do a special ministry that most women would not be able or willing to do. Listen to what's said in verses 28 through 31 about the praise and respect that a woman deserves when she's a virtuous woman. Her children rise up and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praiseth her. Many daughters have done virtuously, but thou excellest them all. Favor is deceitful, beauty is vain, but a woman that feareth the Lord, she shall be praised. Give her the fruit of her hands, and let her own works praise her in the gates. Folks, what do we find in those verses? When a woman leads a virtuous life, she deserves the respect of other people. She deserves their love and their care because she has given her life for the good of others. Now, folks, on purpose, if you notice, on purpose during the course of this lesson, I listed several ladies that have been a great encouragement to me and a great help to me throughout the years. Beginning with my mother from the point in time as a child on, especially my wife above all others. My mother-in-law, my two sisters, Peggy and Jackie. In just this short lesson, I've tried to show how there's been at least 5 women, and I'm sure there's many more. There have been Sunday school teachers. There have been teachers at school. There have been godly ladies in churches that have been encouragements to me and who have prayed for me. You know, there's many, many different ladies that have affected my life over the years that have helped me to be the servant of the Lord that I am. And believe me, I know I'm not near perfect. My only point is, I'm not saying that I'm such a great guy. I'm saying the point is, any good thing you see in me as a servant of the Lord, in many ways it's because of those ladies and the Lord using them in my life. Many of the good characteristics that I do display are because of the influence of godly women in my life. Now, folks, let me tell you something. If that many ladies affected me in my life, I'm sure you all can think of just as many, if not more, in your life. Here's the sad thing. How many of us really stop and think about those ladies and say thank you and try to show our appreciation to them for what they've done for us? I would have to say probably very few of us. So not only was this Mother's Day lesson devoted to ladies, and hopefully it would encourage them to try to lead virtuous lives, but also it should be an encouragement to every one of us to take the time to count our blessings, to remember the different women's influences in our lives that made us better people, to appreciate them, to thank them, and to love them and care for them because of what they've done for us. And because of the example they've set for us. You know, the really wonderful thing is this. There's many times people will affect your lives. They don't even know they're affecting your life at the time. You know, they might be setting a good example for you to follow, and they don't even realize you're watching them. As you think about the different ladies that have affected your life over the years, take time to tell some of them what a blessing they were to you. And you know what? I'll bet at least in some cases, probably they'll say, boy, I never realized that I affected you in that way. We can be a real blessing to ladies today on Mother's Day by simply stopping and thanking them for what they've done for us in our lives. Thank you very much for spending time with me in this Bible study. May the Lord bless you as you continue to study His Word.